Hi guys, I'm John Edward Willie, and today I'm going to read a journal entry that I wrote on May the 1st, which happens to be my birthday. And so this journal entry is titled 8 Thoughts Composed Upon My Birthday. That is the number 8. And each of these is sort of a loose fragment. It's a little incoherent and it is somewhat abstract. But this is the kind of journal entry that sometimes I write. Number 1, the fragile foundation, ghost of the interior. We move through the world, encased in the amber of our own categories. It is a dense, transparent medium, one we forget is even there. We speak of things and selves and functions as if these labels were the bedrock of reality rather than the thin, decorative rugs we've thrown over an abyss. This is the first haunting, the epistemological blindness that mistakes a mental map for the territory of existence. Human subjectivity is not a clear lens. Each mind is a cluttered addict. It is packed with the ghost of metaphysical presuppositions, the illogical connections we make between a coincidence and a destiny, or the false superstitions that lead us to believe that the I is a solid, unchanging unity or entity. We are haunted by ethical arrogance, the delusion that our current moral horizon is the final peak of human evolution, rather than a flickering candle in a vast, dark history. These illusions are not merely errors in judgment. This is the very fabric of the despotic self. This self is confused and distorted as a creature. It is a gatekeeper that prevents us from actually being in the world. It prefers the safety of its own distorted reflections over the terrifying, beautiful clarity of what Heidegger called Dasein, that is, being there. Number 2, the city as a body, micro and macro hauntings. If the human body is a vessel for these interior ghosts, the city is its macrocosm. The city is a body made of brick, asphalt, and collective memory. Just as our cells carry the genetic coding of our ancestors we never met, so the streets of this city carry the ghost of their own past. In the quiet intersections of Midtown or the shadowed alleys of the plaza, the past is not dead. The past is presence. It is the architectural residue of those who built with a certainty we no longer possess. But the city is also haunted by the possibilities of the future. These are not ghosts of what might be, the shimmering, unrealized versions of the skyline that hover over every construction site and derelict lot. The human city and the human body are versions of one another. Both are fragile systems struggling to maintain order against the entropic pull of time. Both are haunted by what they were both are haunted by what they were and paralyzed by the anxiety of what they must become. When we walk through the city, we walk through a manifestation of the human mind, a labyrinth of logic, desire, and historical trauma. To walk the city is to walk through our own neurological pathways, seeing the unconcealment of our collective failures and our private hopes. Number 3, silence as the clearing. To find a way out of this distortion, we must look to the edges of language, as seen in the work of Miss Emily Dickinson. For Dickinson, silence was the space where the aporia lived, the point at which language fails and something truer begins. This aligns with Heidegger's concept of aletheia, usually being of things is concealed by their utility. The bike we confuse for riding, and the city we mistake for navigating. The cafe is for sitting, and the book is for reading. The being of these things is concealed by their utility. It is only the breakdown, or the profound silence of a poem, that the world is unconcealed. Dickinson's silence is the linguistic version of Heidegger's clearing. By refusing to fill the page with the bullshit of common chatter, Dickinson allows the world to show itself in its raw, terrifying being. She practices a sophisticated naivete, stripping away the genealogical rot of Victorian sentimentality to stand before the absolute. We must learn to inhabit this silence, even while biking through the roar of the plaza. We must learn that the most profound things we say are often the things we leave unsaid. Number 4. The authentic Dasein, stepping into the light. The confused self lives in a state of fallenness. It is distracted by the they, or Das Man, Mon, the anonymous crowd that dictates how we should think, what we should buy, and how we should feel. This self is a ghost among selves. That is, a ghost among ghosts. Drifting through a city it doesn't truly inhabit. It is the epistemological blindness that leaves us to believe we are separate from the world, rather than woven into the fabric of its streets. To become authentic, Dasein is to recognize the fragility of our foundations without retreating into nihilism. It is to acknowledge that we are thrown into this world, into this specific body, this specific city, this specific moment in time, in history, and to take ownership of that thrownness. Authenticity is not about finding a true self, hidden under the layers of trauma. Authenticity is the act of standing in the clearing, aware of our own mortality, and choosing to see without interference of our metaphysical superstitions. When you ride your bike through the city, moving between the ghosts of the past and the anxieties of the future, you are participating in this unconcealment. The bike is no longer just a tool. The city is no longer just a backdrop. They become the site of an event, the event of being. Number 5, the flesh ghost, the body as a relic of feeling. In the quietude of the morning, there is a persistent haunting of the physical. We often speak of the body as a machine or a temple, but it is more accurately a flesh ghost, a living relic of the very sensation we have failed to fully process. Human subjectivity is not a clear lens. It is a confused mess. It is packed with the ghost of metaphysical superstitions, the illogical connections we make between a coincidence and a destiny, or the false presuppositions that lead us to believe that I is a solid, unchanging entity. Consider the way a specific tension in the shoulder is actually a sedimentary memory of a decade-old fear. We carry these somatic hauntings through the streets, unaware that our very gait is a ghost story. The body does not inhabit space. It inhabits time, dragging the weight of its own history like a heavy coat. We are the only ghosts who think they are solid. The flesh ghost is a microversion of the city's aging infrastructure. The cracked pavement of the soul reflects the buckled sidewalks of Midtown. Both are fragile systems struggling to maintain order against the entropic pull of time. Just as the body holds the trauma of a long fall after the bruise has faded, the city holds the trauma of its growth and decay. The I that remembers is not separate from the nerves that twitch. The subjectivity of biology is haunting. Number 6. The Jerusalem Cafe Dialogues, the work of deconstruction. Weekly meetings with X at Jerusalem Cafe serve as a ritual of epistemological deconstruction. To sit across from a mentor who is 40 plus years my senior is to witness the ghost of the future in tangible form. These conversations are not merely intellectual exercises. They are patient, sometimes painful, unweaving of the notions that fill a person up with bullshit, those inherited certainties that act as a buffer between the skin and the air. X's presence acts as a counterweight to the despotic self, while the internal gatekeeper seeks to protect its distorted reflections. The dialogue forces an opening. It is a shared attempt to stand before the world, as pre-Socratics did, before the genealogy of ideas filled our heads with the noise of centuries. We sit amidst the smell of coffee and the hum of traffic, trying to reach what Heidegger described as authentic Dasein, a state where we are no longer distracted by the they, das man, das man, but are instead acutely aware of our own thrownness in this specific Missouri afternoon. The stone does not care for the game we gave it, for the name we gave it. And in these dialogues, we try to remember how to listen to the stone. Number 7, the city as body, a macro haunting. If the human body is a vessel for these interior ghosts, the city is its macrocosm. The city is a body made of brick, asphalt, and collective memory. Just as our cells carry the genetic coding of ancestors we never met, so the streets of Kansas City carry the ghost of its own past. In the quiet intersections of Midtown or the shadowed alleys of the plaza, the past is not dead. It is a presence. It is the architectural residue of those who built with a certainty we no longer possess. The cracked pavement of the soul reflects the buckled sidewalks of the city. Both are fragile systems struggling to maintain order against the entropic pull of time. But the city is also haunted by the possibilities of the future. These are the ghosts of what might be, the shimmering, unrealized versions of the skyline that hover above every construction site and every derelict lot. To walk the city is to walk through our own neurological pathways, seeing the unconcealment of our collective failures and our private hopes. The human city and the human body are versions of one another. Both are vessels of historical trauma and containers for a future that hasn't arrived. This is number 8. From the desert to density, the bridge of origins. There is a specific haunting that comes from the geography of one's own youth. To grow up as I have in the American Southwest, specifically the sprawl of Phoenix, is to be haunted by the ghost of an infinite horizontal space. The desert is a place of absolute exposure, a landscape where the unconcealment of the earth is so total it becomes a burden. In the desert, silence is an external force, a sun-bleached weight that strips the self of its pretense. The ghosts of the Southwest are sparse, ancient, and indifferent. They are the ghost of stone and heat. Contrast this with the city itself, the city at present. Here the ghosts are vertical and social. The silence of the desert has been replaced with the chatter of the city, what Heidegger called Jareed. The density of the Midwest provides a different kind of haunt. The ghost of the neighbor, the ghost of the industrialist, and the ghost of the jazz musician. moving from the desert to the city is a transition from a haunting of nothingness to a haunting of excess. The self must learn to find the clearing, not in the literal open sense of the wilderness, but in the psychological pockets of the metropolis. So believe it or not, that is my journal entry for May the 1st, and it turned out to be 8 different sections. And as I've iterated before, I begin this process by walking and talking on my phone. And sometimes I begin with an idea in mind or a prompt or some kind of question that I'm going to articulate while I'm walking and talking on my phone. But for this one, I really was just simply speaking quite openly. And what I like to do, besides sort of editing the sentences that I'm constructing as I transcribe my recording into a typed document, I like to pay attention to the construction of the sentences themselves and attempt to make them as clean as I can. And yet, I'm not attempting to create a schematic, sort of constructed journal that is a false narrative, or I'm not attempting to create a seamless entry that is easily accessible, because so much of what I am is sort of, I deeply resist the more common versions of journals or of diary keeping, because I myself am not scattered. I think that's a mistaken way of thinking about what I do, but I am indirect, and I'm sort of, on the one hand, all over the place, but also deeply concentrated, not within a specific area of expertise, but concentrated within a particular kind of play, within a particular kind of leaping. And so I'm often seeking out different kinds of connections between ideas that are hoping to elucidate a theme. I'm attracted to a journal that can construct something that is about something more than the self. Not that the journal isn't fundamentally about that, and that's what my first journal entries that I've read aloud here are primarily about, is this kind of practical orientation. But oftentimes I give into the speculative, because I not only believe in the life in the mind, as they call it, but I take great joy in having thoughts. And I don't think all day. It's not something that I do, and it's not something that I sweat a lot about. But when I do, I not only think that thinking and writing and speaking are crucial, because we must be serious about our lives in the world and we must think critically, but I think there's an inherent musical quality, an aesthetic quality to thinking that isn't merely just like the dressing on the cake. It isn't merely like just something that makes it like sugar with the medicine. I think that it actually has to do with the inherent nature of our thinking and of the way that, like, if we pay attention to the ways that people have conversations naturally, or that when I have conversations that are good, it's very rare that there's like a neat logical sequence of ideas unfolding. In fact, the underlying premise that I'm suggesting that is a part of my journal writing is that, and this is contrary to how a lot of like people think about thinking is inherently tangential. So thinking is inherently tangential. And what that means is that really no thought you ever have about anything is really ever technically, logically related to any other thought that you have after that. In other words, we habitually relate thoughts, and there's sequences in our thoughts that, for better or worse, we repeat. But in fact, it can't be said that something deductively follows from something else. I mean, what we do is we think in a much more crude kind of way, and in fact, our best kind of thinking is like that. It would be considered junky or very messy when compared to the neat schematics of logic itself. And so I think that a journal has to honor that, and yet that could simply mean including into your journal all the funky details about your life, and I think that's an important part of journaling, is that you're sort of creating a net with the words that you're writing, almost to where you're not thinking when you write, but you're creating a net, and you're dragging this net through your experiences throughout the day, whether they're emotional or conceptual or have to do with other people or anything. And I think what we find is that when we do this as a habit, that is, whether we are walking and talking into our phones and writing, or just simply opening up a blank journal and taking notes, not about always about things within us, but trying primarily to focus on the world outside of us as a way of thinking about what counts as a thought. And then sort of in doing that, I think we will find ourselves quite surprised at how much is going on in our lives in front of us that is meaningful on many different ways. I mean, almost regardless of whatever level you're thinking, you will discover this amplified through the act of journal writing. And it's funny because I really don't focus on journal writing except as a way of producing new writing that often leads to things that aren't journal writing, like essays or poems. In other words, a lot of times what begins as a journal writing or stays as a journal writing will also transform into something else. And that's what I'm working up towards presenting in these videos are those essays themselves, or sort of parsing out articles or videos based on very simple little subjects. But I also want to read aloud the number of the stories, like short stories and sort of scripts for stories that I've written, as well as I have a memoir in the works called Draw Fire that I would love to read aloud and potentially get feedback on, because it's one thing to post the stuff to Substack, which, by the way, my stuff is on Substack, but it's another thing to read it aloud and to hear myself read it aloud. I mean, I'm hearing so much that I can change, and so I'm already growing even if nobody responds to these videos. But I think I'm just going to leave that here, because I could, of course, as I always say, speak at length, because everything does connect to something else. And I'm sure that when I listen to this, I'll hear something that I wish I had said. But like I did mention, my writing is now available on Substack, so check it out. It's John Edward Willie, and I appreciate you listening. Thank you very much.